Council chambers. If you'd now please join with me to enter a moment of silence and pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Granquist.
Here.
Langy.
Here.
Merrill. Dahlquist.
Here.
Buren. Here. Jackson.
Here.
Faust. Here. File.
Here.
Okay, I would look for approval of the consent agenda with a one requested change, removal of item number 13 to the regular agenda.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay, motion second. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Look for a motion to approve the full agenda with the addition of item number 13.
So move, Your Honor.
Second.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative.
Okay, that takes us to special presentations, item number 28. Proclamation for April 28, 2018 as Buddy Poppy Day. Whereas the annual sale of Buddy Poppies by the veterans of foreign wars of the United States has been officially recognized and endorsed by governmental leaders since 1922, and VFW Buddy Poppies are assembled by disabled veterans, and the proceeds of this worthy fundraising campaign are used exclusively for the benefit of disabled and needy veterans and the widows and orphans of deceased veterans. And the basic purpose of the annual sale of Buddy Poppies by the VFW is eloquently reflected in the desire to honor the dead by helping the living. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Josh Moaning, Mayor of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, by the power vested in me, do hereby proclaim April 28th, 2018 as Buddy Poppy Day in the City of Norfolk and the surrounding area, and urge all citizens to recognize the merits of this cause by contributing generously to its support through your donations for Buddy Poppies on the day set aside for the distribution of these symbols of appreciation for the sacrifices of our honored dead. I urge all patriotic citizens to wear a Buddy Poppy as mute evidence of our gratitude to the men and women of this country who have risked their lives in defense of the freedoms which we continue to enjoy as American citizens. Is there anyone here tonight to receive the proclamation? Item number 29, presentation by the Airport Authority to provide a general update on the airport and talk about the progress of the current storm sewer rehab project and the capital improvement project that is coming up regarding the threshold displacement procedure and overlays. And Terry, good evening.
Good evening.
Okay, Mayor Moaning, City Council members, good evening. Unfortunately, I am alone tonight. Things came up and I was the only one that was able to come, so I'm here representing the Airport Authority. And of course, if you don't know me, I'm Terry Walker, the Norfolk Regional Airport Manager. Okay, first we'll talk about this storm sewer rehabilitation project, which I believe I sent some pictures ahead of time, only to give you an idea of just exactly what's been going on out there. Since we had a really long fall and winter began late, Penrose Construction was able to work into the third week in December. So they got a little farther ahead in their project than they intended, and construction was to resume actually today. But that's not gonna happen because it's too wet. So it's been scheduled for next Monday, April 23rd, and so we'll see what Mother Nature does this week. Hopefully by the middle of August, we will be complete with that project. With our main instrument runway being closed for approximately 6 weeks last fall due to construction, it caused a small drop in fuel sales between 2016 and 2017, we showed a 7% drop in gallons, but the dollars was up 3.5%, and that is because of fuel pricing, cost of fuel, whatever. During the hours the airport is open and operation, we can calculate that in 2017, there were approximately 2,700 aircraft and 4,600 crew and passengers visited our airport. If we want to include the 2017 state fly-in, we had about 8,000 people visit our airport last year. Of course, we'll go with the 8,000, that sounds a lot better. We can only track what comes into the airport during the hours we are open for business. There's a coded keypad on the airfield entrance side of the general aviation building to allow after-hours travelers to use the weather monitoring station, access restroom facilities, wait for a ride, or just get out of the elements. Now, I provided you with some ACIP data sheets, and this first one that we'll talk about is runway 119 surface treatment. This is a really big project, and more than, I don't know how many years, more than several years ago, the FAA changed all the RPZ regulations, which is the runway protection zones at airports. The RPZ, it's a trapezoidal area at ground level, and it conforms to a section of the approach surface. And RPZs are to be kept free of obstructions for safety protection of persons and places on the grounds. And since they've changed these rules, it is mandatory for airports that receive federal funds to comply with these regulations. So, in 2015, we started working on this. An extensive study was completed and concluded the best way to accommodate the RPZ requirement changes was to displace runway 19 threshold by 300 feet, thus shortening our 5,800 foot runway to 5,500 feet. This pertains to the approach end, affecting descending traffic only. So the actual runway would remain there for takeoff, and being it'd still be in use, it would still be eligible for federal funding. Displacement of the threshold will eventually lead to the purchase of property and or acquiring easements north of North Airport Road. In 2010, the airport received new PAPIs, which is a precision approach path indicator. There's 4 of them, there's 1 at each runway. So if we displace the threshold, the PAPI needs to be moved, and the FAA requires the airport to pay for that up front to move this system, and then when the project is complete, they'll reimburse us what they don't use, plus 90% of what it costs to move that. Now, the FAA is saying that that's probably gonna be about $150,000, shooting for the highest number that they can. If you go to this second page, the data sheet cost estimate, the engineers have it, I mean, this is just an estimate. They have it at $100,000 with $85,000 engineering services in it. I think that everything has been estimated high. That's all I have to go on is what's on these pieces of paper. You want to go over this quick again. It's the surface that will have an overlay, because the last overlay was in 2010. The FAA requires resurfacing every 5 to 8 years. The threshold will be displaced. Runway lights will be replaced and relocated to match the new threshold spacing, and all areas will be remarked. The 4-light PAPI will be relocated, and guidance signs and runway lighting will be replaced. Currently, the FAA Central Region has more requests than they have money. The Nebraska Department of Aeronautics, who acts as an agent for airports for handling federal projects and funds, has requested not to do all of this project to save money. No reply has been received yet. Aeronautics meets with the FAA, I believe it's the last week in April. A normal grant funding is announced in late April, saying which projects are a go. Since there is a delay because of so many projects, they're now looking at making announcements the first full week of May. So if this project is approved in part or in total, the engineering phase will begin late this year. 2018 construction will probably begin later in 19, and some construction could go into 2020, depending on how soon the grants come and how soon contractors can schedule. Now, on the other two ACIP data sheets that you have in here, these two projects would be done at the same time as this. It's cost efficient to do everything all at once. And these two would be the taxiway surface treatment and the other runway, 1432. And these are, they wouldn't get new lighting because nothing's being moved. They would just be overlaid and they would have new marking. So when you put this all together, you have estimated cost of capital improvements is $2,810,000. Federal share, $2,529,000, and the local share, $281,000. This amount could possibly be spread over the 18-19 and the 19-20 fiscal year budget. It will depend on the timing of the FAA grant release notification, and that's all we can do. Wait and see what the FAA is going to do. And something else that the airport has been looking at, the board members, they're studying plans to construct a new FBO, which is the fixed base operator general aviation. What we use is the terminal building now because we don't have commercial service. The current FBO is very old and outdated. With it being so small, it can only accommodate a handful of people at a time. We're setting our sights on a new facility equipped with a conference room, a pilot's lounge, a section with a weather station, and a place they can access that and do their flight planning. Food and vend area and restrooms equipped with showers. When the governor came to the airport, one of the last conferences that we had, it was so crowded. We were scrambling for chairs and we were packing people in there like sardines, and it was very unaccommodating. So that's about all I have to report on projects. I would like to touch on one item. In February this year, during a recent ice storm, which caused about 24 hours of aircraft not being able to access the runways, an event like this has actually occurred less than maybe half a dozen times in 10 years. At the March Airport Board meeting, discussion was held on the de-icing process. The expense of the de-icing materials, the dispensing truck, the storage facility, labor, and consideration of residue and environmental issues. Costs could range from $6,000 to $10,000 per application. Certain materials can also cause deterioration to the hull of the aircraft. Because the expense involved it's more common. The people that have commercial service use de-icing, but general aviation airports generally do not de-ice. And it was concluded by the board that this would not be it's not cost effective and it would not be an option to do this. So I guess that concludes what I have to say, and I don't know if you have any questions, I'll try and answer them.
Thank you, Terry. On that last point with the de-icing, you said that's not a common occurrence where you cease operations because of
icy runways.
How many times has that happened in the last decade, do you think?
Well, with this last storm that we just had a couple nights ago, I mean, you couldn't use the runways because they were icy and snowy, but nobody was coming anyway. I mean, visibility was so bad. We had NOTAMs out for runway conditions, and I would say, I've been airport manager for 10 years, and I would say this is that incident was probably the third time, that may have caused a problem for someone.
Well, I think one of the interesting things at the March meeting, Mr. Jepson noted, you know, even if you're able to fly in, that it wasn't safe to be out driving, and so to encourage something like that by saying, hey, we've got de-icing things here, that's not a responsible thing to do, and that's why I was very receptive and glad to hear how the board opted to vote on that at that time. So, you know, it's if you shouldn't be out, you shouldn't be out, so.
Well, the storm was, like, I happened to have to be in Omaha that Saturday, and we left Friday night because, you know, the storm was coming, and that worked out well for us. So.
You mentioned planning for a new FBO, which I'm encouraged to hear. I was at that meeting with Ricketts, and
Yeah.
it was pretty tight.
It was pretty tight.
Yeah. What is the timeline for that? Have you established?
Well, we've got these 2 projects to get through, and I would say within the next 5 years. It's as far as we know now, it would not be federally funded. So that would be something that, you know, we would all have to get together and talk about, pre-plan and that, but and to have a big conference room, I assume the airport manager's office would probably be in that building. Things would have to be changed. But then it would open up the building that we're in now, you know, for rental, or we have the rental aircraft out there now, and I know where it is now. There's no running water in that hangar. It's very inconvenient, you know, to use that for that other building where the FBO now, it's used for like flight training, maybe have actual flight training out there. And put it to good use, use it for something. So.
By moving the your approaches,
Mhm.
your PAPI, how does that affect the size of planes that can land there? Does that cut it down?
That was part of the planes, we have an activity report, we keep track of the types and sizes of planes that come in, and we went back 5 years, and we had Olson Associates, that was part of their study. And the size of jet the Norfolk Iron and Metal has is probably the biggest jet that usually comes into our airport. And that, they communicated with Olson's during this time, and it would be about as tight as you can get, but it would be okay.
And
The
they'll
worst
get-
scenario would be, you know, like if it was severe rainstorm or something, and it was, you
The
know.
way to fix that is you said something about egress on the north side of the airport. Is that with heights or?
Yes, with the heights. And the way that I look at it is in the olden days, little prop planes come in and they just practically drop straight down, but now you got all these jets coming in. I mean, they start getting down way before they get to the airport. It's just different than it used to be.
You said what's affected is the descending, not the
Yes, not the
takeoff.
takeoff. So that section of runway would still be there, and I would imagine if necessary, somebody used that. You know, who would ever know? But we gotta follow the rules.
The only difference would probably be the signal from your autopilot landing.
Right,
Would show that
Yep.
it's further down the
yeah, a
runway.
little farther
than it
down.
actually is, but if somebody was
Mhm.
actually handing it, landing it, they would be able to see the runway and land.
Yeah, there's not too much of that, not too much of that
No,
anymore,
not anymore.
too much.
Okay. Any other questions for Terry? Okay, thank
All right.
you.
Thank
Appreciate
you
your
very
time.
much.
Right, that moves us to the public hearings and related action segment of our council agenda. Item number 30, I will open this public hearing to consider an amendment to section 6-173 of the code to alter the minimum SEER rating for residential air conditioners and heat pumps. And to kick off discussion on this, Val, would you help us out, please?
Yes, thank you. This amendment to code, it's mainly a typo we're trying to fix. This code went from 06 to 12, and they always meant to have a SEER rating of 14, and somewhere along the way, it got typoed to 15, and so they're trying to take it back down to the 14 SEER rating.
Okay. Questions for Val? There's a public hearing. Anyone wishing to make comment can do so now. Seeing none, I will close discussion and ask for Planning Commission report, please, Beth.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 3rd, 2018, to consider an amendment to Section 6173 of the City Code to alter the minimum SEER rating for residential air conditioners and heat pumps, and the Planning Commission recommends approval on an 8-0 vote.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearing and move to item number 31. I'd look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5540, approving an amendment to Section 6-173 of the code to alter the minimum SEER rating for residential air conditioners and heat pumps.
Your Honor, I move consideration of ordinance 5540 on first reading.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? If none, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska to amend Section 6-173 of the code to alter the minimum SEER rating for residential air conditioners and heat pumps, to provide when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and to provide for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5540 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5540 on second and third.
Second.
Okay, motion second to suspend the rules. Any discussion? None, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5540 carries on second and third.
Okay, item number 32, I will open this public hearing at the request of Carrie and Barbara Werner to consider a zoning change from C3 Service Commercial District to R2 1 and 2 Family Residential District on properties addressed as 307 North 31st Street and 306 and 310 North 32nd Street. And to open discussion on this, Val, please.
Yes, thank you. You'll probably see on your screen here, just for ease of talking about this, it is Zone C3 right now. The intention is to leave the C3 along Kenningstein and change this area that is up here around the tower to R2 for smaller single-family residential houses. As you can see, there's attached housing across the way. This was approved by Planning Commission. They had a couple questions about the tower being so close, and our explanation for that was it is a current conditional use permit active, so we wouldn't be able to change that. I mean, they have an active CUP, and so we don't technically have the 100% fall range on this thing, but that can be granted relief with the CUP, and so assuming that that was given with that active CUP.
Okay, thanks, Val. Any questions, council? There's a public hearing, so anyone wishing to make comment can do so now. Evening, Dick. Seems like it's been a while.
You better get used to it. I'm gonna be here a lot tonight. I'm representing Carrie and Barbara Werner on this project. Basically, it's the land, as Val described, the C3 area south of them, they don't own. This is just the lots, well, around the tower area between 31st and 32nd. On the north side is Prospect Avenue, which is platted as a half street right now and is undeveloped. What their goal is to put 10 single-family detached houses up there. Tomorrow morning, I'm gonna be in front of the planning commission with a plan development for that. And I'll probably see you guys in 2 weeks with it, I hope. So, if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Okay, thanks, Dick. Any questions?
Thank
Seems
you.
to be fairly straightforward. Thanks, Dick. Anyone else wishing to comment? Okay. Seeing no one, close the discussion. Move to a planning commission report, please, Beth.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 3rd, 2018, at the request of Carrie and Barbara Warner to consider a zoning change from C3 Service Commercial to R2 1 and 2 Family Residential on properties addressed at 307 North 31st Street and 306 and 310 North 32nd Street. And the Planning Commission recommends approval on an 8-0 vote.
Okay, with that, I will close the public hearing and move to item number 33. Look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5541, approving a zoning change from C3 to R2 on properties addressed as 307 North 31st and 306 and 310 North 32nd Street.
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of ordinance 5541 on first reading.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion, anything to add on this file? Okay. Questions or comments, council? Seeing none, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5541 carries on first reading.
I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5541 on second and third.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay, motion second to suspend the rules. Any further discussion? If not, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5541 carries on second and third.
Item 34, we'll open this public hearing at the request of Ken Funk to consider a zoning change from R2, 1 and 2 Family Residential District, to I1 Light Industrial District on property addressed as 1406 Pierce Street. And Val, please, once again.
All right, thanks. This property is on the east side of First Street between Northwestern Avenue and Whitney. I've brought this up. It is this vacant lot right here above the I-1 district. The proposal is to have both of these lots. One is zoned I-1 already, the other is obviously R2 that they want to rezone to I-1 for a business building, like a Morton building type going up. And currently, with the buffer yards the way they are, the one I-1 lot is really unusable, so you have to have both of them together for the buffer yards, because the vacant lot that's being requested for the rezone tonight is 60 feet wide, and 40 feet of that would be remaining in a buffer yard. And so they would only be really gaining 20 feet of usable space. And so that's the reasoning for the zone request.
Thank you, Val. What's the zoning on the area to the north of that lot?
These two houses are still zoned R2. And then there's some R2 across the road with Whitney.
Any questions for Val on this? There's a public hearing. Anyone wishing to make comment can do so.
Pretty much said it all.
So you don't get paid?
I know, I'm just.
You aren't getting paid?
This is at the request of Ken Funk. This is in an area of town called Norfolk Junction, which I think originally was its own town about years and years ago, even before I was around. And I think it was probably when it was laid out, it was laid out more or less as residential lots, but as you can see looking at the aerial, there's been a lot of industrial that has come into the area, especially from the south. West across the alley from this lot is industrial. East across the street, well, I guess the southeast is an industrial. And it just seems like this would be a better use for the property. Mr. Funk owns both lots and would like to put his business out there. He's not anticipating any outdoor storage. Plans to put up, I think, a 7,000 square foot building. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Their area directly to the south, Dick, is that industrial?
Yeah, that's mini storage.
Okay,
Thank you.
questions, thank you. Anyone else wishing to make comment? Seeing none, planning commission, please, report, please.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 3rd, 2018, at the request of Ken Funk to consider a zoning change from R2, 1 and 2 family residential to I1 light industrial on property at 1406 Pierce Street, and the Planning Commission recommends approval on the request at a 6-2 vote.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearing and move to item number 35. Would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5542, approving a zoning change from R2 to I1 on property addressed as 1406 Pierce Street.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion for consideration of ordinance number 5542.
Second.
Any further discussion on this, council?
Well, Your Honor, I see that as a good fit, just looking at the aerial there and knowing the area down in there for years and years and years that is functioned as industrial in that space. That's how that's developing forward down there. You have the recycling area, just everything is just really industrial there. I would not be surprised if within not too long of a time period, even that the other areas, which are fairly larger lots there, also look at following along in the same direction.
Any further comments, questions? Val, planning commission discussion on this, it was not a unanimous vote. Can you relay any, the commentary that surrounded this discussion?
I'm not exactly sure why the 2 no votes, unless it was because of the owner of the house directly to the north had some concerns about it turning industrial from R2, and so that she would then not have residential abutting her southern side. So that person came out in concern of that, and then another person came out that has technically a house across the street, who said he bought the house because, as Councilman Lange mentioned, he felt that looking at this neighborhood, it was going towards the industrial more than the residential, and he bought his on the east side of Pierce Street as a business plan, that it would eventually become probably industrial. So that was the discussion that was had at Planning Commission.
Okay, thank you, Val. Any further comments or discussion, council, on this? If not, short title, please, Val.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5542 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I move we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5542 on second and third.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to suspend the rules. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5542 carries on second and third.
Okay, item number 36, I'll open this public hearing at the request of Ewin Properties LLC to consider a zoning change from RM Mobile Home District to I1 Light Industrial District on property generally located a quarter mile east of the intersection of Highway 81 and Bonita Drive. And Val, please, once again.
Again? All right. I brought this up also. This area that is being requested for a rezone is the lagoon area. And at Planning Commission, the plat of this, because they want to plat off that area also, got tabled because the Planning Commission did recommend a zone change, but they actually recommended a zone change to C3 with a future conditional use permit instead of an I1, which they can do because that would be a less intensive district. So it would be up to you all to, if you want to zone change it, whether you choose to have the I1 or go with the recommendation of the Planning Commission to a C3. Their reasoning, I believe, was because Meadowman's Lake is being developed there. You can see this area from that future development. And Mr. Meadowman did come and speak to the Planning Commission because he, I believe, owns Bonita Drive and wanted some, maybe some conditions that a CUP would help with the access to the, to limit the access of this to Bonita Drive. And I believe Dick is here also, and he can explain the intentions of why they want to do this zone change.
I think this is it.
Okay.
Like Val said, the area that we're talking about is the lagoon for the trailer court, or it was the lagoon. They're now on city sewer and intend to fill in the lagoon, put surfacing on it, and have parking for RVs and campers and that sort of thing. If it was just for the trailer park folks, we call it an accessory use of the trailer park, and I wouldn't be standing here. But they also want to have the possibility of other folks from around town needing a place to park their campers to come out and store them out there. As far as the access goes, their intention is to use the existing drive on the west side of the lagoon for access. They don't feel they need a new one off of Bonita Drive. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
So that access being said that way, that there's nothing preventing them though from, short of, you know, unless it were a conditional use or plan development, preventing them from doing additional access in directly off of Bonita, is there, if they got the zoning?
That's a good question. It's been a long time since I've seen the easement document for Bonita Drive. Bonita Drive, at some point in time, I don't think it has happened yet, but it's gonna be dedicated to the public on the east line of the county property on the north side west over to Highway 81. And then going on east will continue to be an easement. It's an easement now all the way to Highway 81. I haven't, as I was saying, I haven't read the easement document for a while. I don't recall that there's anything in there that limits the driveways. If you're looking for a way to limit it, conditional use permit, I guess, is one way to go. The other thing that crossed my mind is we could put it in the subdivision agreement. The access would be there, and when I pulled the plat, or I tabled the plat at the Planning Commission because I wanted a little time to think about when they recommended the C3 zoning before I brought the plat forward. But you know, we could put an easement on the plat for access to this property, and like I said, have something in the subdivision agreement. I don't know how much weight that would carry. That would be something that would put the city, you know, basically the city would be the one that would enforce it then, as they would with a conditional use permit.
So your client's reactions to the proposal, I mean, are they agreeable to it or not, or the C3 to the C3 in lieu of the zoning that they requested?
They're agreeable to it, probably more than I am. Well, and the only reason I say that, when you get into a conditional use permit, you know, you've got all kinds of other conditions that could rear their ugly heads that may not be in my client's best interest.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dick. So, public hearing, anyone else wishing to make comment can do so now.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Evening.
My name is Paul Mettleman, and I did attend the Planning Commission meeting, and thought the commission members, I thought were pretty receptive to the idea of zoning it to the C3 with the R1 to the north, R2, and the RM to the south. We have residential on both sides, and then to squeeze an industrial in there, I thought was a little much based on historical stuff that council's done here and how they like to see the progression of zonings. But we're going to a lot of expense, and as you know, with the development to the north there, and this area will be very visible from the development if you've been out there. Just a little history. That road is owned by Elkhorn Construction or Mettleman's Lake Development. It was retained the ownership of that because it was an operating gravel pit and they didn't want to give up the access road. So they retained ownership of not only that access, but the access between Norfolk Truck and Peterson. And then we also have a 33-foot access between Bames and Guarantee Roofing that they retained for access to the pit for operations. So the road is owned by, and Dick is right, is owned by Mettleman's Lake Development. It is going to be, or supposed to have been dedicated. I don't know where that's at in the process. Or I had agreed with Dennis Smith when he was here to dedicate it from the highway down to the east side of the county shop there, or the civil. And not knowing exactly how the rest of our development might progress, that's the reason I wanted to stop there and not dedicate the rest of that road, the Bonita Drive, to the city or the county at this time. And actually, we don't know yet 100%. I don't think we will connect Bonita Drive to the development. It will be a dead end there, more than likely. But we will use it for construction access through phases 1, 2, and 3 probably. Then it would be shut down permanently if we decide to do that. Like I said, I don't think we will connect it, but our shop is out there too. I guess, you know, we're zoned light industrial, I believe, and our neighbor is zoned light or heavy industrial maybe, but that would be Mr. Ulrich and then Medallion Shop there and Elkhorn Paving. So I do want to put a gate up. I had thought about putting it at that access at the end of the county's property there, possibly, but would be more than likely would be down the road a little farther. It's very hard to control the traffic from the trailer court. I've squeezed the I've squeezed down the area going around to Sherwood, and they just still come flying through there. It's decreased quite considerably since I've kind of started manipulating the property line and stuff with stockpiles of gravel and dirt. And we have been broke into a couple times down there, and so we're trying to just cut the traffic off from that going that way. So if you have any questions, I guess I could answer those. There is an easement in place. I haven't read it either. And that easement was given to the Wimhoffs back in the late 50s when they started the trailer court there. Before the county was there or anybody. It was, so they had access. Trailer court kind of grew, but they keep adding driveways and driveways, and that's another reason that I asked that it be kind of limited, and that a way to do that would be to the C3, and then you do a conditional use permit to basically restrict the only access to that area would be from that driveway that they have on the west side of the lagoon. If there are any questions?
So Paul, the C3 designation is preferable to you?
Yeah, well, yes, and it gives us the opportunity to control the easement a little bit better, or define it a little bit better, and if they're doing a lean-to or storage, I would think it would suit them to come on out through that one driveway there and then eliminate there is one on the very far east end that they've kind of gradually have turned into a little bit of an entrance now on the very east side of the property. And that's kind of become a problem for the neighbor, Doug Ulrich, but he lives right there in that house. Right there. So it's just an opportunity to maybe help control the area and the growth a little bit.
Okay. Any questions for Paul?
And not to be the devil's advocate, but if you're on the road, why not put a roadblock on
Roadblock where?
it? On Bonita, right there at the east end.
Why could, I suppose.
Restrict access altogether,
Yeah.
is that what you're asking?
Yeah. You own all that right there anyway.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing, I mean,
Well,
you're
there's
doing a
another-
good neighbor thing basically in
there's
my
another-
alleyway.
Yeah, the Mr. Ulrich on the end down there also has an easement to use Bonita Drive.
Oh,
So I have to,
yeah,
he would be willing to go through the gate in and out, but
Yeah.
I'd be more friendly to put the gate down
Right.
farther. But yeah, I think, I don't know, the statutes, I would guess, since it's been used as a road for so many years for the trailer court, that it would be very hard to put a roadblock up somewhere, maybe down farther. I think I'd probably lose that battle.
If that is zone Z or C3, can that road or that driveway be widened? Is there any restrictions on that, Val?
It's his road, so, I mean, the
I
beneath
mean, on the
drive, you
west side of the lagoon, can that throat be opened up if need be under the C3 for the access?
Yeah, if they need a full, 24 feet or whatever they feel comfortable for a two-way traffic, if it's not wide enough for that, I mean,
Okay.
if that's the only way you're gonna be letting them in and out, it probably should be, yeah.
And that's where majority of the traffic comes out of that driveway or the driveway through the county shop there.
I want to say something.
Well, I'm not
I just want to point out,
One at a time.
I just want to point out that the driveway on the west isn't included in this zone.
Is not.
No. It's zone RM. Paul and I talked a little bit, and I don't think he has any concerns if they need to widen it.
Okay.
Is that true, Paul?
No, I don't. They could widen the driveway, that'd be fine, I guess.
Okay,
What I'm trying to prevent is the creation of 1, 2, 3 more, 4 more drives coming onto Bonita Drive, and just funnel their traffic through one designated, or 2, they have another one, they actually have 2 more, that a cul-de-sac area there, right there, and then, the main entrance coming in, through the county shop there, so they.
okay. Any other questions? Oh, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a public hearing. Anyone else wishing to make comment can do so now.
I was just gonna ask staff if they know if that has been dedicated yet, that land.
No, Paul and I last touched base on that about mid-March, as I recall, and he was still enjoying some winter travels at that time, and we just haven't gotten back together. But those 2 easements are sitting on my desk.
Yeah, I'd like to see them getting taken care of if we could.
Any,
Just for clarification, one's a dedication of right-of-way, and then there's an easement that goes east on Bonita Drive as well, for sewer. Yeah.
Just a question probably for Clint, but right now it's in front of us as I-1. But most of our discussion is it being C3, so what would we do here if that's the direction I guess we moved, whether we, obviously we don't do anything if we leave it as I-1, but what do we do if it's changed by council to C3?
The recommendation from the planning commission was
C3.
and, my computer's a little slow, what's the ordinance say?
I-1.
I-1.
So you would need to, if you were to follow the recommendation of the planning commission and change that to the C3, you would need to amend the ordinance that's before you. After you're done with the public hearing, you introduce the ordinance, you would amend it to move it from I-1, as Val said earlier, to any less intensive district. You could do that.
Thank you.
Any further questions as part of the public hearing? Public comment? None. Planning Commission report, please, Beth.
The Norfolk Planning Commission held a public hearing on April 3rd, 2018, at the request of eWin Properties LLC to consider a zoning change from RM Mobile Home District to I-1 Light Industrial on property generally located 1/4 mile east of the intersection of Highway 81 and Bonita Drive. After review of the application, the Planning Commission advises a zone change to the less intensive district of C3 Service Commercial. The applicant proposes to fill in the no longer used lagoon and add lean-to storage for campers. The use is permitted in C3 zoning with the addition of a conditional use permit. The Planning Commission recommends approval of a zone change from RM Mobile Home District to C3 Service Commercial with an 8-0 vote.
Okay, with that, I will close the hearing and move to item number 37 and look for a motion to consider the ordinance as written, number 5543, approving a zoning change from RM to I-1 on property generally located a 1/4 mile east of the intersection of Highway 81 and Bonita Drive.
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of ordinance number 5543.
Second.
Okay, motion and second on the ordinance as written. Some discussion on amending the ordinance to read from RM to C3 rather than I-1. Is there discussion on that?
Your Honor, I think what was presented and the reasoning behind the planning commissions is probably very relevant in this situation, even though there's a little potential out there for additional requirements. It adds a whole lot more protection for that housing development area that's occurring in there in lieu of popping in, you know, on I-1 right in that spot right across from the housing area. I think the C3 would be much more applicable and acceptable that way. So I would like to amend my motion to change the zoning to C3 in lieu of I-1.
I'll make a motion to second that amendment.
Okay, motion and second to amend the ordinance to read, to approve a zoning change from RM Mobile Home District to C3 Service Commercial District. And I agree with Councilman Lange. I think this is a more natural progression given the housing development to the north. Any further discussion on this, council? Questions, comments? If not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote on the amendment motion.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. The motion to amend ordinance 5543 is approved.
So no, yeah, it's okay.
Okay. All right. So given the approval of the amendment, we go back to the original motion on first reading, but the ordinance has been changed with the amendment. So as I understand it, requires a vote again on first reading for the underlying motion. Correct, Beth? Okay. Okay, so any discussion on that? If not, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative. Ordinance 5543 as amended carries on first reading.
Okay. Moving to the regular agenda, we back up a little bit to item number 13. Look for a motion to consider resolution number 2018-20 to remove the stop sign for southbound traffic located at West Norfolk Avenue and 31st Street, and to remove the stop sign for eastbound traffic located at West Norfolk Avenue and the road commonly known as Hospital Road and/or Emergency Road. And Shane, give us a little background on this, please.
Yes, sir.
Looking for a motion, sorry.
So move, Your Honor.
Second.
Oh, thank you, Shane.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is an item that was put in place, I guess, for lack of better words, when reconstruction happened out there and we closed off the access from West Norfolk Avenue to Highway 275. There's a stop sign. There's two stop signs, actually. One's been removed with the construction project, and that was right on 31st Street there, southbound, coming onto Norfolk Avenue. As you know, that's an old, well, I think that looks like an older aerial. There's actually a dead end there, and you can't go any further west on Norfolk Avenue. So that stop sign actually has been pulled, and we didn't get your blessing on that. So we're gonna knock that out tonight too, with your blessing. And then the stop sign on the eastbound on Norfolk Avenue heading back into town, there's a stop sign that has been placed there and been there for a number of years. It seems like when traffic meets there, there's some confusion there on whether turning traffic has to stop, that the westbound in particular stops and waits, and the eastbound's waiting at the stop sign for them, and there's no stop sign heading west. So just seems like there's some natural confusion there. There was a request made that we look at that. The Police Division and Engineering Division looked at that and agreed that that seems to be causing some confusion. So we went ahead and took the liberty to place some signs there, our electronic signs. We placed 2 electronic signs about 10 days, 2 weeks ago, warning the traveling public that that stop sign would be removed. So we took the liberty that you would approve it tonight. If you don't, we'll change those signs back, obviously, and warn them that it won't be removed. But that stop sign, with your approval, will be removed tomorrow morning. And then we'll change the signs warning that folks that it's been removed for a period of time. and then we'll go about our business, or the traveling public will go about their business of transversing that intersection. So with that being said, I just thought it was on consent, I thought it'd be a nice idea just to air it a little bit more so we get some media coverage. You can't overemphasize these kind of things when you have a change in traffic patterns. So we're just trying to take the extra steps for the safety of the citizens there. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thanks, Shane. Any questions for Shane? Appreciate the groundwork. So if we don't approve this tonight, we're gonna confuse a lot of people.
If we don't, well, we haven't pulled the stop sign yet, Mayor, so if we don't, we'll change the traffic signals or the signs back and warn everybody that it's staying in place.
I feel pretty confident that this might be approved. Thank you, Shane. Any further discussion on this or questions, Council? If not, would ask for your vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries. Resolution 2018-20 is adopted.
Okay, moves us to item number 38. I would look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5530, approving the final plan development for Norfolk Junction located at 211 West Northwestern Avenue. As a reminder, ordinance number 5530 was tabled at the March 19th council meeting and passed on first reading only at the April 2nd council meeting.
Your Honor, I move consideration of ordinance 5530.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Anything to add or remind us of on this, Val?
Just a couple things. One, the R3 zoning did get passed on the third reading last time. The R3 zoning really isn't functional without the planned development because it gives all those reliefs to the buffer yards that are necessary. And so with that one item that came up on the maximum density or the maximum units, what you have before you is a revised plan. The only thing that got revised was the maximum number of dwelling units from 10 to 12. Just so that when they did bring in building permits, they wouldn't have an issue and have to redo the PD if it gets approved.
Thank you, Val. Any questions? Any questions or comments, council? If no discussion, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance of the City of Norfolk, Madison County, Nebraska, amending the zoning district map of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska, providing when this ordinance shall be in full force and effect, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
Voting in favor of ordinance 5530 on second reading, council members Granquist, Dahlketter, Murin, Jackson, Fowles File. Voting against the ordinance, council member Lange. Ordinance 5530 carries on second reading.
Okay, we'll move to item number 39. Look for, excuse me, look for consideration. Motion to consider approval to award a contract to Rutchins Construction Incorporated of Tilden, Nebraska for the South Water Main Loop project for an amount of $1,703,281.15.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion for consideration of approval.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay, Steve, can you give us some background on this, please?
Yes, Councilman, Mayor. This is the bids that we received for the extension of the water main across the river on First Street and on Highway 81. And then it would connect along the south side of the river from Highway 81 over to First Street. We received 4 bids. The bids ranged from about $2,374,000 was high, down to $1,703,281.15. Rutchins Construction was the low bidder. The engineer and staff is recommending acceptance of that low bid. I'd also note that we had made a modification to the design contract with Olson's and included about a $500,000 sanitary sewer improvement. We're replacing 21 of our old original 1890 vintage 21-inch sewer interceptors. And so that is included in this project as well. We took advantage of the fact we're going to be ripping up First Street and decided we didn't want to rip it up twice, so we did include that. With both of those in there, the combination is below engineer's estimate by quite a bit, and so we had good bid results. Any questions?
Thanks, Steve. Questions on this project?
Planned completion prior to the end of this construction season?
Yes. I can't remember exactly what the completion date is on that. I'm thinking August, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I think it's around August 1st. In order to provide, we need to tie in Meadowlands subdivision or Meadowland addition down there. I think our tie-in date was around that 1st of August.
Any further questions? If none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Okay, item number 40, look for a motion to consider approval of ordinance number 5544, creating paving district number 516, providing for paving of Sunrise Drive from Victory Road west 585 feet, David Street from Sunrise Drive north approximately 225 feet, and David Circle from Sunrise Drive south southeasterly approximately 485 feet.
Your Honor, I'd move consideration of ordinance number 5544 on first reading.
Second.
Okay, Steve, can you give us background on this, please?
Yes, this would be creating the first paving district for Phase 1 of the Legacy Bend subdivision. These are the various streets involved with that project. Answer any other questions you would have?
Any questions for Steve? If none, short title, please.
An ordinance creating paving District 516 in the city of Norfolk, Nebraska, ordering the construction of street improvements therein, and ordering the publication of the ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5544 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I'll make a motion that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance number 5544 on second and third.
Second that, Your Honor.
Okay, motion second, suspend the rules. We have one question I thought of on this development. We've run into this issue in the past, Steve. Do we have sidewalks accounted for on both sides of these new streets? Okay, good. I wanted to get that on the record.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion or comments, council? If not, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5544 carries on second and third.
Okay, item number 41, I'll look for a motion to consider ordinance number 5545, authorizing issuance of special assessment bond anticipation notes in the principal amount not to exceed $900,000 for paving districts 510 and 511 and sidewalk district 2017-1.
Your Honor, I move consideration of ordinance 5545.
Second.
Okay, Randy?
Yes, Your Honor. This provides the interim construction period financing for Walters East Knolls 12th edition, Wyndham Hills 2nd edition, and the sidewalk improvements along Victory Road and Sidewalk District 2017-1. We expect the actual note issue to be $855,000, but we've structured this to solicit bids from the local banks. It's possible that they could add a premium to their bid, so we have put not to exceed $900,000 in here. This also allows us, if we don't get good bids from the banks, to allow Meritus to underwrite the bonds. Recommend approval on all three readings.
Okay, thanks, Randy. Questions for Randy on this? Okay, if not, short title, please, Beth.
An ordinance authorizing issuance and sale of bond anticipation notes of the City of Norfolk, Nebraska in the principal amount of not to exceed $900,000 for the purpose of providing interim financing to pay for the cost of constructing improvements in paving district numbers 510 and 511 and sidewalk district number 2017-1, pending the issuance of permanent general obligation various purpose bonds of the city, prescribing the form of said notes, agreeing to issue the city's general obligation various purpose bonds to pay the bonds at maturity or to pay the notes from the holders of said notes, authorizing officers of the city to make arrangements for the sale or placement of the notes, and to designate the final terms, rates, and maturity schedule for said notes within stated parameters, and providing for publication of this ordinance in pamphlet form.
Okay, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5545 carries on first reading.
Your Honor, I would move that we suspend the rules and pass ordinance 5545 on second and third reading.
Okay, motion second to suspend the rules, paving the way for more housing development, which is always a good thing. If no further discussion, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, ordinance 5545 carries on second and third.
Item 42, I'd look for a motion to consider approval of a contract with Knife River Midwest LLC of Sioux City, Iowa for the Street Overlay 2018-1 project for an amount of $1,311,352.50. And Steve, please.
I'll make
Oh,
a motion,
sorry,
Your Honor.
Sorry,
Second.
got ahead of myself. Steve, please.
Council members, Mayor, this is would be the bid for the mill and overlay project for 2018. We had one bidder. We were anticipating a couple based on conversations we had prior to bid. However, the one bid we did get was extremely competitive, about 7% under engineer's estimate. Just to read the segments that are going to be included in this would be First Street from Northwestern Avenue to Bluff Avenue, Norfolk Avenue from 9th Street to 14th Street, Benjamin Avenue from the flood control to Victory Road, McKinley Street, 5th Street to Tahazuka Park, and 5th Street, Monroe Avenue to McKinley. So those would be the segments that we would be milling and overlaying. Staff recommends approval. And I'd certainly answer any questions that council would have.
Is that the same style that they did last year? Or last year that was a micro?
That was a micro surfacing. This is going to be mill and overlay, so we'll be taking 2 inches off the road of concrete. These are mostly concrete sections. And then overlaying that with a super pave asphalt mix.
It's absorption into the concrete.
It is, yeah, it is a way to kind of pull off that upper 2 inches that has a lot of that cracking, a lot of the accumulation of salts that in a freeze-thaw cycle, they just kind of start to deteriorate the surface faster and faster as the concrete absorbs more salt. So we mill that off, kind of put a seal or cap seal back over it.
So these segments, Steve, would have been determined last year to have been too deteriorated for microsurfacing. They needed more work, essentially, right?
That is correct. Yep.
And do we know how many? Can we characterize this in the number of lane miles?
I believe it's around 24 lane miles.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, please vote.
All council members present voting in the affirmative, motion carries.
Okay, and finally, item number 43, administrative reports. Randy, a presentation on the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2017, along with the related auditor's letter.
In your agenda package, you've got 2 financial reports. These are under enclosure 43, beginning on page 200 of your packets. The first is a comprehensive annual financial report, and the second is the auditor's management letter. We usually have 3 reports in here, including single audit reports, but last year we did not have a single audit report. We don't this year either, primarily because they changed the threshold from $500,000 to $750,000 of federal expenditures to when you needed a single audit report. This year we spent about $545,000 of federal awards, which is well below the single audit threshold. We saved $3,000 in audit fees by being below that single audit threshold. There are substantially more audit procedures that have to be done under a single audit. Most of this year's federal grant expenditures were from the community revitalization grants, and that included replacing the water main on Madison Avenue between 1st and 7th Street. Since we don't have a separately issued single audit report this year, there's a section at the end of the CAFR reports required by government auditing standards. This begins on page 333 of your agenda packets. These are clean reports noting no internal control weaknesses, non-compliance with laws or regulations, or audit findings or question cost. The CAFR is similar to last year and begins on page 200 of the agenda packets. On page 220, you have the independent auditor's report, which is a clean opinion saying that the city's financial statements are prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The best place to look for a broad overview of the city's financial condition is the 2 government-wide statements that are on pages 31 and 32 of the CAFR, which are pages 238 and 239 in the agenda packets. These are on a full accrual basis, similar to business financial statements. And the statement of activities, which is similar to an income statement, is on page 239 of the agenda packets, and I'll focus on that. On the top part of the statement of activities, the various government functions are listed down the left-hand column, such as public safety, public works, and library. These expenses are on a full accrual basis and include depreciation. The next column for each of the next columns for these governments functions, there's the program income involved, starts off with expenses. And the community improvement and development expense was $1,035,861 last year. And this is expense related to the city's housing and economic development activities. The next 3 columns are program revenues derived from these governmental functions, broken down into 3 categories. Charges for services is the first of those columns. And for community improvement and development, you see we had $102,647. This is the money the city receives from the housing agency to partially reimburse us for the city employees who are in the Section 8 program. The operating grants and contributions is the next column over. We received $587,000 of these grants from community improvement and development, primarily for things like housing rehab and facade improvement program. And the third column is capital improvements and contributions. There were no capital grants for community improvement and development, but if they were, they would show there. And finally, you take the expenditures less those 3 program revenues, and you get the net cost of operating that particular activity. Governmental activities is in the first of these columns, which is the net cost of the activities that have to be subsidized by general revenues. We don't expect general government functions to pay for themselves. You're not going to get parks or police or fire to pay for itself. So you pay for those with the general governmental revenues shown at the bottom of the page. Business type activities, on the other hand, like our water, sewer, and solid waste fund, you do expect the users to pay those costs. And as would be expected, all of those business type activities show a net profit from the operation, and all the governmental activities show a net cost. The net cost of governmental activities decreased from $19.8 million last year to $16.5 million this year, which is a positive change of about $3.4 million. Most of this is in community improvement and development. Last year, that was about $3.9 million, I believe, and this year it's only $346,000, which the difference is primarily due to the LB 840 program. And that, if you'll remember, we had a $3.6 million that we used to fund the natural gas pipeline that we paid in 2016. We didn't have this expenditure this year, so that went back to what you'd normally see that running. For the business activities, we had net revenue of $2.1 million. This is about a $700,000 increase from the $1.4 million we had in the prior year. Expenditures stayed about the same. There was $7.3 million this year compared to $7.4 million last year. There was a big change, however, in charges for services, which went from $8.5 million last year to $9.4 million this year. $100,000 of that was an artificial increase. We'd been reporting rent revenue down in general revenues, for the business type activities. We had a comment from a GFOA reviewer, and we have Government Finance Officers Association review our reports every year for participation in the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting Program. And they pointed out that technically those are considered program revenues for governmental activities. There's $100,000 that was added to those program revenues and normally would have been down in general revenues. The biggest part of that increase is due to rate increases. Water rates increased 9% at the beginning of the fiscal year, and sewer rates 8%. And then we had another sewer rate increase of 6% effective September 1, 2017. These rate increases were used to fund capital outlay, so they're shown on the balance sheet as an asset and not as an expenditure on here. That increased the net revenue from the business type activities. Something else I'd like to point out is that debt service, which is the line immediately after community improvement and development, went down significantly this year. It was about $455,000 last year and $323,000 this year. This is primarily due to a refunding of the recreation facility bonds in January 2016. We had part of that savings reflected in last year's statement, but this is the first full year of the savings, and that caused the decrease that you're seeing there. We had a significant reduction in interest savings of almost $3.5 million over the term of the bonds because of that refunding. The bottom half of the statement activities shows the general revenues the city used to cover the net costs of the governmental activities in the top half. The largest of these general revenues is sales tax, and we have a continuing problem with that not growing very fast. You see this year that only increased from $10,614,793 to $10,677,614. That's less than a 0.6% increase. Our next largest revenue source, MPPD lease revenue, is shown on a line labeled general revenue from electric distribution system lease, and this actually decreased. Another problem we've had for a number of years is NPPD is trying to hold their rates in line, and we get 12% of system revenues. So there's basically been no growth in that, no growth anticipated. It fluctuates with weather primarily. The third largest revenue source is property tax, which increased about 8%, primarily due to increased valuations. There's also a $70,000 increase in general fund property tax over what was realized because of the assessed valuation increase. This is primarily to pay for the first year of cost recertification for the flood control levy. When you combine these general revenues with the net expense or revenue shown above, you get the change in net position, which is similar to net income for a business. As you can see on the line, which is towards the bottom of the financial statements, about the third line up, we had a net income of $8.9 million this year compared to $4.4 million last year, which is a difference of $4.5 million. Governmental activities change in net position was $6.3 million compared to $2.8 million last year. A difference of $3.5 million, primarily due to that $3.6 million of pipeline funding in the prior year. We're back towards normal now. Business type activities change in net position was $2.7 million this year compared to $1.6 million last year due to the rate increases used to fund capital outlay I discussed earlier. The last report in the agenda packets is required communication from the auditors or the management letter. This is on page 337 of the agenda packets. This letter talks about the auditor's responsibilities and are generally accepted auditing standards. It's a clean report, noting no disagreements with management or other difficulties in performing the audit. And answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Questions, Randy?
Did you repeat that?
Yeah, not everybody else. I do want to say thank you and acknowledge Randy and his staff for their diligence in managing the books throughout the year. I did recently receive a notice from the Governmental Finance Officers Association, again commending the city of Norfolk for its budget management, financial reporting efforts. So that speaks to the good work of our audit staff and our finance officer. So thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Mayor.
Anything else? Comments, questions?
On the sales tax, you know, and you keep hearing all the, talk about online sales. That probably wouldn't make a huge difference as far as Norfolk.
Well, it's hard to say, but I think it would make a very noticeable difference of hundreds of thousands a year. Various ways of looking at that, but well, first of all, let me say we're losing a lot more revenue than we're ever going to gain, even if the Supreme Court hears that case on overturning Quill tomorrow. Even if that happens, we're never going to get back anywhere close to what we're losing, because we used to have people coming into town buying things from the outlying communities, and that sales tax revenue came to us. If Quill gets overturned, or if Congress does something like the Marketplace Fairness Act, which allows us to start collecting sales tax on internet sales, the people that live out of town that used to come into town to buy stuff, that sales tax is now going to go to the community they live in if they have a sales tax. It's not going to come to us. We have a big draw factor. So we're probably losing twice as much as we're ever going to gain. But I still think we gain hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in sales tax revenue if something like the Marketplace Fairness Act passed, or if the Supreme Court, after they hear the South Dakota case tomorrow, decides, which will probably be a month or two before we find that out, but if they decide that Quill is no longer what should be in the modern age of internet sales, and lets us start collecting those revenues, I think we'll see hundreds of thousands of dollars of increased revenues. State will have to make a law change probably to make that effective, but a year or two down the road, that would start rolling in. I think it would be significant.
Good question. Will be significant. It's unfortunate that the legislature failed this year to pass a bill that would prepare us to start collecting if the decision is overturned. But any other questions? Okay. Again, thanks, Randy. That concludes this meeting of Norfolk City Council.